If you're a fan of the show, you've probably heard me say something along the lines of the nostalgia cycle has rolled around to the 2000s, probably in that exact phrasing. And if you're new around here, well, you also just heard me say that. But when I talk about this, I'm specifically referring to the early to mid 2000s, or in video game terms, the 6th generation. The nostalgia cycle is for losers like me who love categorization for some reason. It pretty simply states that the culture, the art and fashion of a given era will be inspired by the era that came roughly 20 to 30 years before it. It's never that clear cut, of course, and inspirations bleed into each other. One of the ways I love to keep track of this is with video games. I've always found that even in comparison to movies, for instance, video games can be a great way to define an era's aesthetics. They often encompass everything. So many ideas boil down into one digital creation. The music, the films, the art, the fashion of an era. They show what was considered fun, who the target demographics were, what looked cutting edge. It gives such a distinct window into a time in very recent media history. This is easier to say about the 5th generation onwards, as previous generations were a little bit too simple to distinguish all of that from them. But when I say aesthetics, what do I mean? You see, the internet has kind of taken that word and made it its own thing, and as a result, everyone has their own ideas of what an aesthetic is. If you were to drop the "an" and just leave it at aesthetic, well then you're talking about vaporwave, where aesthetic was instead an adjective that basically meant your vaporwave picture looked cool. Vaporwave is the reason I care about this subject at all. It is probably the reason I'm making videos, because it got me into creating digital media. Because it was really easy. Slap a pink and blue gradient on there and place a few PNGs of expensive bottled water that tastes bad. Don't forget the Evangelion. We have to let everyone know we're annoying to talk to. It also introduced me to the concept of the nostalgia cycle, as it too harkens back to a version of the past that never existed. An idealized, possibly satirical view of a bygone era's look and feel, the technology, the water. Following on from that, we have the Tumblr era of aesthetics, where we still sort of find ourselves. Where they aren't just sub-communities creating weird pictures featuring like marble statues and Arizona iced tea. Instead, it's far more personal. Far more about you and your real environment. This is where we get the infamous academias. It was your aesthetic, you wear it, you live it, and the values associated with it. This private definition of the word obviously causes issues, which brings me to my guilty pleasure, the Aesthetics Wiki.
I promise this is relevant.
The Aesthetics Wiki for me is an A to Z list showing so many aspects of humanity, and even if it isn't exactly the most reliable source in the world, it doesn't matter. I am addicted to clicking through the countless articles and looking at the pictures. It's actually a really great place to come and be inspired. All of that is to say that I recently stumbled upon an article that caught my eye. It was called 7HD, and it put an idea I've had in my head for years into words. It described that PS3 feeling. The term 7HD was coined by fashion designer Steve Pepys. It's really hard to say. And I think it is a perfect term for this look. However, the article that inspired this video no longer exists. It has been taken down. The reason for it being, this represents a technical limitation and stylistic preference of a specific gaming era rather than a distinct and broadly recognized aesthetic with its own cultural or artistic significance beyond the technological context. This is, and let me just Google a word that fits, bollocks. To imply that Shitfilter John over here is a technological limitation is ignorant at best. The article was clearly removed because nobody was making TikToks tagged 7HD, and that is the important thing. I mean aesthetic in the sense of a bunch of media sharing a specific look and feel, and analysing the reasons why and what it can tell us about the time it was made, who it was made for, and who made it. So let's actually give this aesthetic the proper analysis it deserves. Part 1. The end of the PS2. The PlayStation 2, and by extension the entire 6th generation, had a few distinct aesthetics. As I'd argue, it was the first time games could truly have art styles. I know that sounds insane, but trust me here. While yes, games of the 5th generation definitely tried to have art styles and did the best they could, it kinda got lost in the polygons. Unless it was super obvious, like say Mario 64 versus GoldenEye, but even Mario 64, despite trying to appear bright and cartoony, uses a lot of real-world photography to build its world, which lends itself to this kind of real, weird feeling. If you thought a game like Half-Life was trying to look realistic, for instance, you'd be kinda wrong. Its strong stylization and almost cartooniness is part of what has allowed it to look better than its contemporaries. If we look at any of the images that surrounded Half-Life, or hell, earlier builds, we can see this far more clearly. But when we look back on it, we see a game that was trying to look real. The 6th generation changed that, and it really shows. It no longer felt unified. We could get anywhere from funky cell shading to grim horror. Horror was actually a pretty big aspect. The PS1 might be the console most associated with horror nowadays, but in reality, it's the 6th generation that really shines as having most of the best horror games. The spooky feel leaked into other games at the time too, even in ways you wouldn't expect. Take the GameCube launch title, Luigi's Mansion. Even Super Mario is trying to get you to piss all over yourself and your friend's pants. So you'd expect going into the 7th generation with their advancements in power that we'd get even more varied looking games. Early 7th gen games often looked like souped up previous gen games. For instance, something like Fear, which was impressive at the time, in retrospect, it almost looks like playing through the pre-rendered cutscene of an older game. Its harsh shadows and reflective shaders almost give it a 90s render feel, but of course instead it was all dynamic in real time. A game like Oblivion also has that souped up feel. You can tell it's taking advantage of the new hardware, but it's as if you magically granted a PS2 era developer a stronger machine. One of Oblivion's most obvious traits to me is its use of color. It is so bright and lively that as long as you don't, look at any of the people, the world still manages to hold up and have such a strong fantasy feel. It might be one of the most traditional fantasy aesthetics in any game ever. It's like being able to explore the world shown in the cover of fantasy novels. With such a strong visual style, it's no wonder that the next game would, Okay, well, bad example. Grand Theft Auto's aesthetics don't get appreciated enough. When we look at the initial 3D trilogy, we can see so much varied imagery. I'd recommend this video for a more in-depth look at GTA 3, for instance. It is wonderful. It goes over the game's almost Silent Hill-esque look and feel that portrays the dismal state of the city. For me, what stands out is how it feels like this bridge between the modern open world and, say, an old-school racing game. It's things like Rockstar feeling comfortable plastering their logo everywhere on billboards that gives it this feeling. Nowadays, they're only comfortable putting their logo on in-game bins. You can make the obvious joke. Vice City looks entirely different. Part of its image is how dated it is, yes. With them being unable to do dynamic lights and therefore needing to create 2 versions of the main street just to have it lit up neon. Though it is a perfect encapsulation of exaggerated 80s nostalgia. And San Andreas is filled with unique visuals, with each city having its own entire vibe. And just an unbelievably blue sky. I don't see anyone talking about this. It feels so weird, and I love it. So with GTA being so visually varied, even within the same game, it is no shock that Grand Theft Auto 4 looks... Okay, I mean at least cartoony Nintendo would never... What? Part 2. So yeah, we all know it. The 7th generation of consoles has a shockingly ugly library of games. But why? As mentioned before, the aesthetics wiki moderators would want you to believe it's because of technological limitations. But no computer ever made you smear the screen in shit. Right? Some have argued that it was indeed technological limitations that led to the 7th generation's dull visuals. In a blog post by a game developer of the time that is so old it has unfortunately been mangled by the internet's need to look glossy, the post alleges that this visual style can be explained by, essentially, developers just wanting to play with their fancy new toys, but not really knowing how. All of these new effects to make advanced materials and bumpy, detailed environments, but not the lighting to support it. Because the PS3 and Xbox 360 couldn't really simulate indirect lighting, it would make things look off. The games were too detailed. The primitive lighting would look notably jarring when combined with the more realistic environments and models, and by desaturating and of course darkening, it hides all of these imperfections. And sure, these are definitely explanations, but this is a very dry, techie way of looking at things, and seemed to take the art out of the medium. In fact, the author of this blog post would go on to refute the idea that video games can be compared to other art, like a painting, that they are indeed products. But games aren't made by computers, yet. They're made by people. And what can we glean from that? Part 2.1. Realism. A major point constantly brought up was that this generation was obsessed with realism. This could tie in with the previous tech explanations, that with the advanced hardware, developers could now make the realistic games of their dreams. But it begs the question, why is realism brown, grey, or green? If you actually go outside, you'll find that the world has such a huge spectrum of colours on display most of the time, that the greens of the real world are vibrant and lively, not sick and dying. Developers of this era were most likely trying to be realistic, but it is a cynical and depressing, stylized realism. The real world does not look like this, but sometimes it feels like it should. Video game stories were starting to get a little bit more literal, less abstract, more like cinema. They were taking themselves seriously, and when reflecting the real world, heavily reflected its nastiness, and all that pain and mundanity leaked its way into the color palette. Grand Theft Auto 4 is a perfect example. Now that the technology could handle it, they went for it. I joked earlier, but I think this is one of the few games that earns its look. It depicts its fictional New York from a very specific perspective, a viscerally corrupt perspective. Despite what the game's art director Aaron Garbut said about New York, that it is an amazing, diverse, vibrant, cinematic city, that is not what comes across in-game. It is neither diverse nor vibrant, but instead a soul-crushingly dull concrete jungle. Misery permeates the game at every level, from mundane evil to its most extreme. The only pops of color being red blood and the belongings you steal from people's corpses. It's one of those games. However, every level of GTA 4 reflects its style and themes. It uses realism quite well to build an atmosphere and to immerse the player. Car chases have never felt quite as dangerous and brutal as they did here. Unfortunately, that cannot be said for all 7 HD games, so what gives? Unfortunately, while something like GTA 4 is clearly carefully crafted, other games seemed to be trend chasing. If the look of video games is now dull, then we have to do that. We have to sell our products. So we have to talk briefly about the target demographic. Part 2.2, Masculinity. Like a lot of English-speaking media analysis, this is a very American-focused story, but what can you do? As the story goes, video games were marketed as a family thing. You had games on boards, now you have games on video. It's fun for the whole family. Then, post-American video game crash, consoles had to be marketed as toys. And when you marketed toys, you needed to pick a gender. Because of course you did. So video games ended up being for boys. And it would continue that way for years. Will you get the girl, or play like one, whilst thou suck? However, I think the PlayStation 2 to some degree accelerated this, as now video games weren't a boys thing, they were a man's thing. Ugh. With the popularity of Grand Theft Auto and, sports games, video games firmly started to place themselves as a medium for the manliest men. An interesting example of this is the official PlayStation magazine, where it went from being, about video games to instead being about boobs, where it was desperately begging its readers to send in more pictures of girls and asking if they want to be tied up in their office. Also, what? Video games weren't just trying to be realistic, they were trying to be mature, to appeal to a juvenile view of what is adult. From the beginning, Gears of War has looked like a parody of itself, so ruthlessly masculine that it is comical. It would be a mistake not to talk about it in a video about the 7th gens. I mean, just look at it. With that stocky body and butt rock face, it is wonderfully dated in every way, but definitely in what it means to be a man. Hypermasculinity is absolutely a defining trait of this era, and a very interesting case study started at the tail end of the previous gen. With, you guessed it, Resident Evil 4. I wonder how much of my life I've spent talking. Has this ever happened to you? Everywhere on the internet sucks right now. I can't go fucking anywhere. Twitter, more like Twitter. Then I have the perfect fucking solution. Whoa. What was I saying? You need to join the Guys Home for Aspiring Vampires server. That's right. The home is a real place that you can go to. Go to. You can send text, images, maybe a little bit of sound. That's right. You can call your friends. Who needs a phone when you got the Guys Home for Aspiring Vampires community server? Oh boy. My phone screen just changed color. I'm not even joking. Did I hear that you like amazing emotes? Look at that. Whoa. We got just an immaculate fucking soundboard. Listen to this. I actually do not know what that is. Fun commands. Carl, how do I join the server? Carl, behead my father. Just listen to these amazing reviews.
Let me go grab my controller.
Want more out of your experience? Want more Kai in your life? That's great. I absolutely have the fucking solution. Oh, you've been waiting for this day, haven't you? Oh, you have. You motherfucker. You piece of shit. God damn. That's right. You now. That's right. You now have the ability to give me money. Okay, picture. Oh, I dropped my microphone. Picture this. Imagine you had money, but imagine I had it instead. And that's Patreon. That's right. So make sure to join the free server. But if you want a little bit extra, a little bit more, consider subscribing on Patreon, because it also it helps me continue what I'm doing. So if you enjoyed this, and if you didn't, do it anyway, because I love dollar. Yippee! I also have an addiction to buying jackets. I'm kidding. I spend it all on Robux. Welcome everybody to the intermission. This is where we absolutely fucking intermission it up. We intermit all over the place. No, but seriously, this is a little break. Basically, the latter half of this video is going to get a lot heavier, so I do like to kind of break it up, and so gotta get this out of the way now, because if I do it afterwards, it's just gonna seem inappropriate. But make sure to follow me on Blue Sky. That's where I'm posting all my shit. I'm posting all my shit on there. It's an app, it's a website. You can go there to post or look at posts. It's very unique in that regard. Never been done before. This is also where some fan art is shown. What the fuck? Pictures on my screen of me? That's fucked up. That's a crazy idea. So anyway, look at all the talented work we've received. I mean me. Okay, I guess I'm multiple people now. That's fine. Feast your eyes upon it, dickhead. Enjoy the rest of the video. And make sure tonight that you drink 10,000 beers. Don't do that. That's bad. Or do, actually. Make sure you drive afterwards. In many ways, Resident Evil 4 is a game in Generation Limbo. Released right at the end of the 6th gen's life, and in that old 7HD article, the game was listed as a sort of precursor, and I begrudgingly agree. While I think that RE4 has some really great art direction that remains strong to this day, it is hard to deny that it is indeed often brown and grey. Of course, I think this is good brown and grey. It's an example of how this colour palette can be done well, especially when more vibrant colours are contrasted against it. But it is indeed a bit dull. However, this is the masculinity segment. You see, Leon Kennedy is no longer the weak beta fucking low T cringe cuck or whatever they're saying nowadays. He is a strong man. He is cool and composed. While I don't think Leon is the icon of video game masculinity, he's a bit too extra for that. It is a definite step in that direction. Resident Evil 4 is framed quite differently from its predecessors. While it isn't like the series was ever subtle, RE4 jumps the shark into all-out action all the time. The game's treatment of women is also just different to how it used to be. While the original trilogy always had women in strong leading roles, now the main female character you see is consistently docile and useless. Not to mention the camera's sometimes leering quality. I don't even say this as a direct critique. I mean, I love Resident Evil 4, just an observation that shows that this change in attitude was not overnight. Resident Evil 4 is often blamed with killing horror games, but I'm not so sure this is true. I think Masculinity killed horror. Because now everything has to ooze manly bravado, gross. It has to be a power fantasy, and being scared, being vulnerable, neither of those things are very traditionally masculine, are they? Resident Evil 5 is one of the worst games I have ever played. It is like playing through Resident Evil 4, except at every level you fucked something up. The combat may be the same core mechanics, but every punch feels weaker and floatier than any of Leon's kicks. The level design is genuinely horrible at times. It is as if they are constantly insecure and trying to recreate the thrill of the famous village fight. Movement halfway between Ori 4 and a modern game. Trendy and poorly designed cover mechanics, so you can never get comfortable. However, I'm not a game reviewer. You don't need me to tell you that Ori 5 is just Ori 4, but worse. If you've played it, you already know. However, what it did do was bump up the bravado, bump up the sexualization that wasn't present before. And before the comment, since I got this a lot last time, horny outfits or designs aren't necessarily a problem. It's the context that matters, and also the quality. If you think a character like Jill Valentine looks better in this game than she did in the 90s, then I don't understand you. In many ways, Ori 5 is the icon of the gen. It is an encapsulation of so much wrong with it. Its awful filters, its alleged cultural insensitivity, and the wideness of its protagonist. Chris Redfield is not a horror game protagonist. He's this weird amalgamation of what Japanese game designers think American men love. In that sense, it's almost the game's best quality, how the developers interpret Western trends in visual design, where they miss the mark, and end up creating a game where the 7th gen military man protagonist punches a boulder really hard. This aversion to vulnerability seeped its way into other horror games, like the distinctly Resident Evil-like series Dead Space, which went from amazing horror to cringe within the same generation. So is that it? Do these games look the way they do because they're just trying to be manly, and as we all know, men love dirt? I mean, yeah, but is that the whole story? No, I don't think it is. Disclaimer: I am not an American. Thank God! Part 3. The military. Call of Duty initially started out as a series of World War II shooters. Not anything too unique. What it presented was a fictionalized, idealized version of the war that's already the easiest to make a story out of, with built-in good guys and bad guys. It could present these narrative ideals of heroism and bravery without really having to think about what they were saying. It was an event of the now distant past. At least in America, the wounds had long since healed. But you can only do World War II for so long. What's next? Vietnam? That's a bit more touchy, isn't it? Might present the Americans less than favorably. So for the 4th installment, Call of Duty chose Modern Warfare. I'm not the first person to make this connection. If you would like further visual analysis of Call of Duty specifically, please check out Faceful of Eyes video. Call of Duty's dullness, its dirt, its grit, doesn't feel like it just comes from technological limitations or even masculinity worshipping nonsense, though I suppose those are factors. Instead, there's something just a little bit more worrying. Call of Duty looks like war viewed through a very specific lens, that being one from a digital camera. Modern Warfare's look can be rooted back into footage from the Middle East of US soldiers taken with dirty, distorted and low-quality 2000s digital cameras. You can almost sense it. It's first-person narrative. While the World War II games had the same aim-down sights mechanic, it was Modern Warfare that truly popularized it, made it ubiquitous. It was one of the first to try capture the feeling of looking down a modern rifle. This form of immersive, camera-like first-person design is still present in military and police glazing video games to this day. Where Modern Warfare replicated a war as seen through the low-quality footage, modern games seek to emulate the camera itself, where the distinct, distorted look of body cams have become more and more prominent. It's from here with Modern Warfare that we can see a darker side to the 7HD look, one that is a result of technology but not what was in the consoles, but instead the limitations and built-in look of the tech used to capture the violence and destruction. In fact, within the game, war is viewed through a few different filters, not just the grey and brown, but the searingly green night vision and ghostly thermal vision, both of which further abstract the violence, further dehumanization. No blood is being spilt, only targets neutralized. There were no lives taken, only rooms cleared. If you believe this to be intentional, then you're being too charitable. If you think the horrors of war matter to Call of Duty, you're simply wrong. They are nothing but set pieces. This game is not trying to be realistic, as many would claim. Both visually and mechanically, it is presenting only what it thinks is cool, only what would appeal to the target demographic of young, post-9/11 American men and boys. This aspect of it is glaringly obvious. It can't just settle for the destruction of the Middle East, but also has to play into Red Scare nonsense with Russian ultra-nationalists trying to bring back the Soviet Union. The disgusting parts of war are only here for shock and awe. It drapes itself in this iconography. Thanks to the embarrassing use of death quotes, you can almost interpret the game to have any message. It's a series that, despite everything, despite the military propaganda it pushes, will claim to be apolitical. Resident Evil 4 is unfortunately a precursor in this too. The evil wizard is not allowed to be an evil wizard. He is a terrorist. It's all terrorism. It's all oorah. Every single game designed to quench the American bloodlust for people who look and sound different. Would a piece on 7th Gen military propaganda be complete without the video essay darling that is Spec Ops: The Line? I'm sure you know what it is. I don't need to tell you, do I? It's a classic. The one example us pretentious jackasses can point to of a game like this with some depth. Even if shallow, even if the game beats you over the head with its ideas, at least it is something. Something to push back on the rise of military shooters where cruel bombs are dropped only so you can see the bright colors. Part 4. Deconstruction. I mentioned the nostalgia cycle because to some degree I couldn't truly imagine the 7th Gen nostalgia. Not for this kind anyway. There were some unique games released this generation, maybe for those, but the dirty, piss-filtered nightmare games? No way. Maybe from random dudes, but not the type of people who will go on to actually make anything. You can track the nostalgia cycle with indie games. Those of the 2010s were so retro, with clear inspiration from the consoles of the 80s and early 90s, and you can see the remnants of this in certain series. But a lot of developers moved on to the 3D look of the 5th generation, and we've started to see some 6th Gen style games that take after its unique aesthetics. But the 7th generation has a huge problem, in that it is a modern console. It doesn't have a lot of the things that make previous generations so unique. What is there to be nostalgic for? This is reductive, of course. What I failed to consider when starting work on this video was one of the 7th generation's most interesting traits, one that is genuinely perfect for future indie game developers, and like a lot of things, it can be rooted back to that one game. So let's take a final look at Resident Evil 4. I know, but this GameCube game is very important to understand. It's not just because I like it, I swear. There is an underlying uneasiness in Resident Evil 4, but it takes a long time to manifest. And I'm not talking in the traditional tense atmosphere horror sense. There are hints here and there, but for the most part, the game is pretty set in its tone. That tone being that what you are doing is fucking awesome. Leon S. Kennedy, as mentioned before, is presented as the coolest guy in the world, and the game frames his actions as badass and heroic. The Ganados are just that, Ganados, cattle, cannon fodder, not to be understood as anything remotely human. Despite their seeming consciousness, despite their ability to still speak clearly, they are as okay to brutalize as are normal zombies and infected insects. Violence against them is often actually used comedically, like during the Gigante fight or Mike's helicopter. They are a foreign force. They might still speak, but it's not Leon's language, so it doesn't really matter. A trait the 7th generation would embrace, where its American heroes tear through countries they don't understand. Though the 7th gen uses perhaps more vulnerable groups than the Spanish. But the point still stands. Yet there are these moments here and there that call this into question. I think it's telling that nearing the end, where the villain is giving his tell-all speech, he mentions film. The game is acknowledging the propaganda, that evil American-hating terrorists are a Hollywood archetype, that the type of person he is invented, and says that this isn't like those movies, yet of course it is. Then there's sorrow. Sorrow, or the end credits, is one of the strangest decisions I think Resident Evil has ever made, and it goes somewhat overlooked. You have spent hours upon hours slaughtering these people, and up until the last possible second, it is depicted as the coolest thing ever. After all, they are evil cultists for you to do wrestling moves on. You were supposed to feel empowered when you kill them. It is an American fantasy, and then, just before you move on, the game stops and humanizes them. It is a fascinating move to try to make you feel somewhat guilty over everything that happened. This feeling would lay dormant for most of the first half of the generation, where it was notably absent, where instead our protagonists were awesome violence machines saving the day. They were honorable, knew when breaking the rules was more moral than playing along. Then, just as fast as the widespread macho valorization of American violence kicked in, by the latter half of the generation, it started to be deconstructed. This is where you get your spec ops, and this is what I imagine the indie developers of the future will be making. Max Payne 3 released as the generation was finishing up, right before the end. In many ways, it is a triumph of how far the system had come. Its airports, offices, luxury parties, and yachts all rendered in a way early 7th gen devs could have only dreamed of. They broke free from that PS3 feeling. It was separated from that built-in dirt and grime. It could actually represent a locale realistically, with its true colors not disguised by heavy filters. Well, that's half the story. Max Payne 3 is a game with a heavy theme of rot. One of the first things you hear, and the name of the opening chapter is quite directly that there's something rotten in the air. This decay slowly consumes the entire experience. As Max devolves, those tones creep back in, the 7th gen's iconic, putrid colors. If digital war footage informed the feel of modern warfare, then the mass adoption of those cameras and the proliferation of the internet informed the look of these disturbing games. Max Payne 3 is constantly distorting, both matching the protagonist's disorientated and inebriated mind, most clearly shown in the nightclub, which Max seems to barely be able to handle, and the look of corrupted footage. Kane and Lynch 2 takes this a whole lot further, with the camera being a character. These digital distortions add to the unease, the queasiness. It almost feels like you could see anything, as if you're playing through a live leak video. Kane and Lynch 2, Spec Ops: The Line, and Max Payne 3 see their aggressive white male protagonists tear through foreign countries they don't understand, just like their predecessors did. Yet there is an understanding that this is vile. Yes, often the people they kill are not saints, but you just can't shake the feeling. Max Payne 3 goes out of its way at some points to humanize your enemies. Awful as their cause may be, it's a job. How many poor kids want nice sneakers? It ain't hard to hire. As that rot takes over more and more, the locales change, from penthouses to slums. I start to realize how I would never want this game on any other generation. Max Payne 3 needs the 7th gen hardware. It needs the PS3, it needs the Xbox 360, because nothing else could handle it. No other console could capture that sickening feeling. Technology advanced enough to be grounded and to feel real, to get believable performances out of actors, but not so advanced that it almost acts as a sensor. When I explore the hotel near the end of the game, I imagine how much worse it would feel on any other console. The 7HD aesthetic worms its way back. You can just feel it. The hotel is reminiscent of games like Fallout New Vegas. Only this hardware could produce this. These textures, the lighting, the materials, the grit. More advanced hardware would almost just by its very nature pretty it up too much. This is that PS3 feeling. It's filth. It is the perfect technology for making the most disgusting games, and I love it. Raw, sleazy filth and the deconstruction of the protagonist, the dissection and to some degree desecration of American media's most treasured cultural archetypes, the soldier, the cowboy, the police officer. Red Dead Redemption 1 is notably different from its sequel. That game is far more beautiful. And it isn't just a technological advancement, it is clearly a different intent from a studio that matured. That game is almost painterly at times. It has its moments of disgust, but it is often counterbalanced by a real sense of restraint and an eye for both traditional and cinematic ideas of beauty. Red Dead Redemption 1 is rough. It isn't more violent than its sequel, but that violence just feels different. You aren't dealing with a charming, lovable rogue's slow decline, you are dealing with the aftermath. Like a Grand Theft Auto 4 depicted a stylized reality 1 to show misery, Red Dead Redemption 1 uses its stylized realism to depict harshness, not just of the environment but of the people, and it is flippant in its use of dark and heavy subject matter to portray a more callous West than they'll probably ever do again. And just like other games, John Marston is not so subtly put down by everyone around him. They start to deconstruct his romanticized ideas of being an honorable thief really quickly. I used to think 7HD was a failed aesthetic, one that tried to just appeal to insecure men, but like all things I say, that is reductive and stupid. I can easily imagine a world where indie devs of the future use this to depict a brutal reality. The retro games are perfect, for lack of a better term, quirky experiences. The 5th gen perfect for these uncanny surreal worlds. The 6th perfect for its ability to both do bombastic styles and ethereal horror. And the 7th generation is perfect for a grim dark reality. It's the perfect style to entertain the most depraved concepts, to push the limits of Protagonist. When are their actions too far for us as players to put up with? It can't hide behind pretty visuals. It was only a year after the release of Max Payne 3, the game that I think perfected 7HD, that Rockstar would essentially kill it. Their last game for the 7th generation did not follow the aesthetic of all their previous ones. It felt like a continuation of the polished parts of Max Payne 3. That game is Grand Theft Auto 5. It is sometimes easy to forget that this game started its life on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. Where previous GTA games sacrificed graphics in favor of scope, Grand Theft Auto 5 instead sacrificed complexity, making it one of the most simple games in the series. That simplicity is at the core of the game. Unlike Grand Theft Auto 4, the game's tone is significantly lighter. It adopts an action movie philosophy in regards to violence, that you simply aren't supposed to think about it. It is more focused on spectacle, on these unique but scripted moments. Shooting while rappelling down the side of a building, crashing 2 trains into each other, flipping over military vehicles with construction equipment. It's clear where its influences lie, not just in what films inspired it, but what games did. See, while 7HD remained the predominant aesthetic for mature games, leaving anything else to children's games, there was an alternative, a sister aesthetic cropping up at around the same time, the Naughty Dog aesthetic. Far more colourful, more focused on spectacle, more focused on looking like a movie, feeling like a movie. The Naughty Dog aesthetic was a stepping stone towards what we're kinda dealing with today, what I am currently calling the PlayStation Studios aesthetic, or what some would call the AAA art style. While these games were very successful, I think we should still focus on Grand Theft Auto 5. To say the game killed 7HD might actually be a bit too on the nose, as there is a scene fairly early on in the game where one of our new protagonists, Trevor Phillips, just straight up brutally murders the main character of GTA The Lost and the Damned, the most 7HD game to ever exist. I would have spoken about it if it wasn't really fucking boring. But look, these 2 screenshots were taken at the same time in the same place with the same weather, one in The Lost and the Damned and the other in The Ballad of Gay Tony. Holy shit. It is the strongest shit filter of any of the GTA games. It almost feels like Rockstar is abandoning their true edgy past in favor of their sardonically edgy present, with a big fuck you to anyone who liked The Lost and the Damned. The game's aesthetic, its vibrancy, meant it was no shock that it could so smoothly transition to the next generation. However, there's something else, something a little bit more existential going on here. You see, you can still find traces of 7HD, traces of how Rockstar used to design their worlds. The game came out with these harsh, sharp shadows and a sense of dirt and grime, but all of that has been smoothed out over time. You see, Grand Theft Auto 5 is now on its 3rd remaster. With each one, it has gotten more colourful and softer. Those harsh shadows have been completely removed in the newest remaster. Of course, you can bring them back, but that's not the way they intend for you to play the game anymore. Here's the thing, this new lighting makes me feel weird, because on the one hand, never have I been able to appreciate the work the artists put in quite like this. The new lighting has lit up areas that were previously bathed in shadow, areas I would have never explored because, well, I can't fucking see anything. Now we get to see all the unique colors and textures, the details the designers put into every corner of the map. It has given me an appreciation for a game I thought was just a little bit too simple. But of course, it's a different game now. My old opinion on remasters was that they were a net positive. It's the game you like, but in HD. How lovely. That's all. It's preservation. It's an upgrade. And who doesn't love upgrades? It's not like a remake which should do things differently, should play with its source material, should treat itself as an adaptation, where remasters need to focus on accuracy. I don't know if I think this anymore. Remasters fuck shit up all the time, and to some degree are just kind of not needed. In recent years, I've found myself shying away from these games in favor of their originals because that's how they were intended. Small changes to a game's look, like even just brightness, can have cascading consequences on the image, and as a result, I'm not playing Grand Theft Auto 5. I'm playing a weird modded version, one that's a little bit too pretty for comfort. See, GTA 5 needed that 7 HD-ness. For when you went north, that dirt, that grime, that harsh lighting fit those areas much better. Now, Rockstar's depiction of American poverty has never looked more beautiful. Also, while recording this atmospheric footage, I got attacked by a hog, and it scared the shit out of me. It is an entirely different experience, and I know that in the future it will be the default one. Will the generations of tomorrow play GTA 5, the PS3 game, or another remaster built upon this one? We are to some degree losing games, losing visual styles, and it happens in such subtle ways sometimes. For the longest time, the Steam release of Half-Life was missing something, the lighting. I mean, it was there, but it wasn't quite right. This was due to the fact that the game just had the default settings way too fucking bright for some reason. So you fix that, and we once again have Half-Life's deep shadows. So are we done? No, not at all. As the Steam version uses OpenGL to render the game, which fucking destroys the genuinely really good water shader, which makes entire scenes look worse. Like this scene in Zen, which is supposed to look like a shallow pool of water, it instead uses the rocky texture as the surface of the water. Nice. Not even a remaster. This is just a port, and yet it lost so much. Part of this is we look at video game visuals as a linear sequence of failures, as if every generation is the next step towards the shared goal of true realism, and therefore every single game released where the characters in it don't look like they could exist in real life is another failure that we just put up with. Gamers don't know shit about art. Low-res textures, 480p, lighting that isn't ray-traced, these are failures. These are relics of the past that need to be restored, cleaned up. We need 8K and 240 FPS. Recently, there was the release of the demo for Half-Life 2 RTX, and it is, and I mean this with respect to the hard work of the developers, one of the worst things I've ever seen. If it wasn't free, I think I'd be mad. It is a complete slap in the face to the art direction of the original. Half-Life 2 looks fucking great. It might be one of the most pointless projects I have ever seen. Not only is it ugly, not only is it bloated, being a demo that is 40-something gigabytes, while the original entire game is currently sitting at 8. It is representative of something just a little bit shit. That being RTX Remix as a product. This is the tech demo for it, for the ease of which fans can just butcher their own games. Because replacement is what we're supposed to do. All of these games are mistakes. They need to be changed, they need to be modernized, they need to be fancy and clean and bloat your system and use upscalers and frame generation just to give off the illusion that they run. Please spend all of your money on a computer part that you should not need. Art, video games, and preservation. I got in a bit of shit, perhaps justifiably so, for my last video, in which I kind of poked fun at a guy without engaging with what he said. I had my own justifications for this, but of course, that's not how it was taken by many people, and that's fair. I know I didn't do it right, so why don't we just briefly look back at that fucking RE4 video. So in the video at one point, the Electric Underground talks about what he thinks makes a remake artistically valid. And what he says should honestly discredit him entirely. He advocates for replacement. He does not think that a remaster or a remake are artistically valid unless they directly replace the original. He genuinely says the new game should make you want to throw your old one away.
Capcom or Square, when they're announcing these remakes, are not coming out and saying, yeah, Final Fantasy VII, go ahead and throw away your PlayStations because the remake is going to absolutely replace the original. But in my opinion, that would be the most valid goal of a remake. The most artistically valid way to remake something is with the intention to replace it, to improve it so much that the original version is just garbage. But that's not remake culture.
I don't have an argument against this, not directly, I just think that it is, as an idea, awful and anti-art, and I think that should be somewhat self-evident. If you care at all about the medium, then you should never advocate for replacement, yet it happens so often. Resident Evil 4 changes a lot, not just between it and its remake, but between it and itself. The experience is entirely different on GameCube than it is on PC. One lends itself more towards the game's horror elements and the other action. The PC version is relatively close visually, it has more stuff in it, more unlockables and bonuses. It's at a higher resolution and has more intuitive controls. Under this framework, it's a perfect replacement, but that's it. It has all this different stuff, because it's different. It could never replace the original because it simply functions differently. The people who love this video praise the original Resident Evil 1 remake. An amazing game, but it could never replace the original. Just look at it. It is a completely different aesthetic experience. As faithful as the remake is, it can't be the original, because it isn't. I mean, just listen to the original Barry.
But just take a look at this. It's Forrest. Oh my God.
Fucking love that man. All of this is to say that we view 7HD in particular as a mistake. We laugh at the poo-poo filter, the fact that The Lost and the Damned permanently looks like it's in Breaking Bad Mexico, the fact that Toon Link looks like this in Brawl. What the fuck happened? I was guilty of this. I don't see it that way anymore. Yes, there are 7HD games that are ugly as fuck and look bad, but there are games that use it really well. We need to start taking the graphics of the past more seriously, to actually look at the game's art styles, and if not appreciate, then at least acknowledge. At the start of the video, we saw 7HD relegated to just being an artifact. The past's failed attempt to do what we can now, and therefore not recognized as an aesthetic. Of course, even if this was true, even if 7HD was a mistake, that wouldn't invalidate anything about it. Often limitations are what give us the aesthetics we love. Why is this so different? I have to assume it's just too recent. This uncanny bridge between old and new. A middle child. One that is always associated with realism and edgy nonsense. I previously thought there could never be a time where the PS3 is looked at the way the PS2 and PS1 currently are. Clearly, I was wrong. There will be a day when developers of the future, having grown up with these games, will bring the look back to tell tales of rot and misery, to critique the bloodlust of 2000s America. Really fun stuff. I've been, what was my name again? What am I called? What's my channel? What am I called? I've been that person, and, Punchline? No, fuck, I was supposed to think of one. Punchline, no, I just said it again. I would just like to thank patrons App, Not Poncho, Autumn, Dayglow, I should probably message you about that one, Goma, Nico, Saxon, Sammy3D, It's June, and Gamma Freya.
Oh my God.